Hey everyone, James from TDB here, bringing you another in-between episode. Today I am going to be drinking a tea, a Fuzhuan Heicha tea. And why am I bringing this tea on exactly? Well, I, in the last few months, made an order to Yunnan Sourcing. I ordered their Just Fucha sampler, which I think is 6 different Fuzhuans. And then I also tacked on a couple additional Fuzhuans, just ones that people had mentioned before, and so wanted to talk about what I thought were a couple of my favorite ones of the set, as well as kind of how I've been drinking it and my feelings in general. I actually ordered this as well as the Tianjian sampler. I would say, on average, I actually prefer the Tianjian as far as Heicha goes. That's also often made in Hunan. But one thing I did find out about these Fuzhuans is they're not always made in Hunan. There's sometimes they're made, I believe, in Shanxi as well. And actually, one of the favorite ones that I liked in this set is Into the Fu Aroma. So shout out to someone recommended that one. So shout out to that person. I apologize. I should have looked up your name ahead of time. Didn't expect to be talking about that tea too much. That one's actually made from Linsong tea in Yunnan. So it's kind of funny that one would end up being one of my 2 favorites of the 9. So this is the other one. This one is the Baishaxi from 2013. And one thing I did find in general is, like, I think when I don't care for these teas as much is when they're a little bit, like, of a brighter taste. I, in general, like it when the teas bring a little darker. So I do tend to gravitate towards a little bit more of those aged teas. I find that to be true as well for the Tianjian teas. And I have been brewing these teas a couple ways. I would say I basically had my breakthrough where I started to actually enjoy this tea a little bit more when I basically just upped my ratio. Some other people have suggested kind of boiling it. I think in general these teas do better when they're pushed pretty hard. So basically upping my ratio in my big blue pot, so drinking them pretty casually. Overall, something like 25% or so from what I would have for ripe. So instead of doing 10 grams for 185 milliliters, the big blue pot, instead I'm doing like 12.5, something like that. Of course, it's not always exactly that, but it's about that. So that's usually how I've been drinking them. I've also tried to drink all of these at least twice. Sometimes I've been doing them just Gongfu style. I kind of follow a similar pattern there. I'm just basically upping that ratio by 20-25%. And then pushing them a little bit more. And I find I just get a little bit fuller taste, and I personally find that to be a little more interesting. Perhaps it's because I like pu'er tea, and pu'er tea is generally on the strong side of things. But I have my experience has definitely been quite a bit better doing it that way too. So yeah, ordered from kind of a nice sampler of a bunch of different factories. I do really like these sets that Scott offers. I wouldn't say that every tea in there I'm going to give like a recommendation to, but there's definitely some that I think stand out, and I think as far as giving you a range, because there's definitely a range to these things, I think it does quite a good job for that. So this one is a 1 kilogram brick. Mao Zedong is from Hunan, so this is a commemoration for something like, I think it was like 120 years since his birth. Doesn't mean particularly a lot to me, but yeah, it comes in like this big red 1 kilogram brick. Time will tell whether I order more of this tea or not, but I will say that I think it stood out amongst the other ones, and this is definitely one that I enjoy and would recommend, and perhaps I'll drink it with Denny. So let's get on to the tea. All right, so I have been drinking this tea in the morning, so this is something like steep 5 already. I apologize. Hopefully there is enough juice in this tea to keep going, but I really had to film this episode today, so I'm coming into it just a little bit later. The color is still quite nice here, because it's sort of an orangish red. And I'm brewing 5.8 grams in something like a 70-75 milliliter gallon. So pretty loaded. That's almost like yancha ratios here. In fact, maybe even slightly more than yancha ratios. Going to make another steep as well. And it has a nice little color going on. Try to break up that brick fairly well. And this is kind of the infamous one. Oftentimes people think of this as like an interesting oddity because of the golden flowers. In my experience, it's not nearly as offensive or as weird as it sounds. In fact, I almost think it could be a potentially better gateway into kind of Heicha than even the more popular pu'er is. Mainly because it's a little more mellow. It's not necessarily as bitter, and the taste isn't like super funky or anything like that. You can get a little bit of that, but there's definitely like some more oolong-y type notes going on here as well. So I also wanted to shout out Oolong Ao Char for kind of just being a big proponent of these teas. I don't find quite as much qi as like her or Siwen does in these, but I do enjoy them, and I do enjoy drinking them. So I appreciate the encouragement to keep going at these sorts of teas. So yeah, let's get going on to this one. Cheers. So very woody taste, pretty smooth. I would also say the thing that stands out for this tea, it's pretty sweet without like having a lot of those kind of brighter hay notes that sometimes I get for them. These teas sometimes get fairly yeasty. I wouldn't say this one is particularly yeasty. It's also kind of funny. Puts a disclaimer in all of these to basically, if you have celiac disease, to avoid these. I definitely do not have celiac disease, so I am happy to drink these teas. But that is the sort of terrain that we are in, as far as kind of like the cultures that are injected into this tea. So definitely one that has a very specific processing. One of these days I'll have to do a episode partly for my own education as well, just of all the different heichas and kind of how to fit them, like what fits with what, as far as like kind of the categories, light to dark, what ones age well, that sort of thing. I think that would be probably a good episode, just because one thing you'll realize is like heicha is just a huge term. It's a huge umbrella. There's a lot of different heichas within it. Pu'er counts as a heicha as well. And there's just a huge range. There's even a huge range within just like raw pu'er, and that's only half of the pu'ers. Cheers. In my experience, these teas do taper off a little bit faster than something like pu'er. Using a higher ratio, I think probably they're going to go about the same amount as something like a ripe wood. Yeah, just a nice sweetness to it. A little bit of like Chinese herbalness going on as well. And I think what makes this and Into the Fu stand out is like I like their just in general darker, sweeter tastes. And generally speaking, if you are a pu'er person, you're going to find the prices for Fuzhuan and other heichas besides pu'er to be generally on the less expensive side of the thing. The downside is you might end up with huge kilogram bricks, which are just, big. A lot of these, 1 kilogram brick might actually be on the small side of some of these Fuzhuans. A lot of them are even 2 kilograms, and that's like almost a tong that we're dealing with. I would say body-wise and stuff like that, it's definitely a little lighter than pu'er. Texturally, there is like kind of a nice mineraliness going on with this as well. There's nothing overly complicated. In fact, if anything, maybe it's like a little basic, but there's just like a nice body and a nice base to this that's kind of like a little weedy, a little woody. Yeah, even a little fruity coming into this as well. And just have this last steep. It's definitely one of those that I am a little curious what Denny would think, and I do have a big 50-gram sample of this, so might be one that we'll see later on in between episode. Yeah, I appreciated everyone's Fuzhuan's recommendations. I tried to go through them and order all those and make sure those were in my samplings. So continue to let me know if there are some other interesting ones. When I do sample again from a place like Yunnan Sourcing, I could definitely tack on those. Almost like a little perfumey aroma. The aroma is definitely dying down a little bit. But we do expect that because we're on something like Steep 7, Steep 8. Yeah, and pretty steady as it goes. It's not changing a whole lot steep to steep. I noted early on that there was kind of this nice sugary aftertaste that was happening. Getting a little bit less of that now. Perhaps that could show itself in a minute or two, but I definitely got that kind of earlier in the session on the steeps I did earlier this morning. Okay, well, I think that just about concludes this in-between episode. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Let me know if you've tried this tea. I think it's it's a solid one, and I would say if you're curious about this category, this one just comes in the Just Fu sampler. So go ahead, try those teas. There's some interesting ones in there. I like this a lot more than the other older one, the Cha Yu Lin 29 Steeps one. For some reason, I didn't care for that one quite so much. But this one, I think, is probably one of the top 1 or 2 favorites, at least on the kind of initial grow round, having just tried most of these teas twice. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I will see you all next time. Cheers.